Please join me in welcoming David Baldacci.
Well, thanks a lot for coming out tonight. Saturday night in D.C., I'm not sure I would have come out for myself. So I probably would have gone someplace for dinner or whatever. But we'll get out here in time for you guys to go do something else tonight, too. I do appreciate it very much. I've been writing for a long time, and Politics and Prose was a place I'd come to when I was practicing law, and I would go there and buy books and stuff. I can't believe I've really never made a visit here before that I can remember anyway. But it's, past time for me to be here, and I'm glad that I am here. Now, how many people have been to one of my book signings before? Raise your hand. Oh, great. I can use all my old material. Anyway, I always like to check before I do that. It's funny when I go out on tour, and when I was younger and first starting out, my first 10 years, any place anybody asked me to go, I'd go. I get a call from Gladys in Nebraska. Hey, I've got 3 people in the book club. You want to come by? We'll give you dinner. I was like, I'll be there, sure. So, I go to Nebraska and I have 3 people. I sign books, have a nice chat. So I went everywhere. And it was important for a couple of reasons. One, it's nice to get out and support bookstores because they need all the support they can get. And 2, it's a great opportunity for authors to connect with fans and readers. And that's what I really love about this. I don't really need a tour anymore, but I do because of that experience. I just love to hear people come up and, tell me things about the book. Obviously, I like it a lot more if they say they love the book. I don't like it as much as they say they don't like the book, but, that's their opinion. But that's why I like to do it. But one of the questions I get asked more than any other is, what is it like to be a #1 best-selling novelist? And I know the way they ask the question, they want some really exciting, glamorous Hollywood answer. Like I get up at noon every day, and I put on a favorite smoking jacket, and I have a furry little dog that I carry under an arm, and I go down to my little study where I have a bunch of people just waiting to write down my every utterance. Now, my life is not like that. My wife will certainly tell you that. It's like when I come home from a book tour, and I tell her all the great things that have happened. She goes, that's really nice. It's trash day. Get on it. So in answer to that question, what is it like to be a best-selling novelist? I tell them a story about my kids, a true story. Now, my kids are grown now. My daughter's a junior in college. My son's getting ready to go to college. But when she was about 5, I took my daughter to a book signing. And first time she had been there with one of those with me. And we walked in, and the lady who was running the bookstore was really nice, came over to us, greeted us, and asked my daughter, do you know why all these people are here? And my daughter said, yes, I do know. And she goes, why? They're here for my dad to sign their book. You know why they want your dad to sign their book? And my daughter said, yes, I do know. They want my dad to sign their book because my dad has the nicest handwriting. I still think she believes that, actually. But, my son was about 3. I took him to a bookstore, and we walked in. And I wasn't there for an event. I was just there to, look for some books. And he walked in, and he saw the people and all the books, and his eyes got huge. He's like my little entrepreneur, And all of a sudden, my kid started running across the book tour at the top of his speed, screaming at the top of his lungs, my daddy will sign any book you've got for $2. Because this is Politics and Prose, you'll be glad to know that I've waived my signing fee for tonight, and I will not be charging you $2 to sign your book. Now, some people ask me, have you ever been recognized in public? And occasionally, yes. Often the name is recognized a lot more. But even when you're recognized in public, it's not the ego stroke that you think it might otherwise be. One time I was sitting at a restaurant with my wife. We were in a booth having a nice lunch. And I glanced up and looked across the room, and there was this woman, like laser-eyed on me. And she was sitting at a table, I guess, with her husband. And her look was so, ferociously inquisitive, I just was panicked, and I just looked away. And a couple minutes later, I sort of peeked over, and she was, still lasered on me. And I was just really freaked out. So I just started looking at my plate of food, and that was it. Then I sensed someone next to me a few minutes later, and I looked up, and there she was. And she pushed me over in the seat and sat down next to me. And she looked at me, with a sort of wry smile, and she said, you are who I think you are, aren't you? That's quite a weird question. And I said, well, do you read fiction? And she said, yes, I do. I said, okay, I probably am who you think I am. She was so excited. She goes, this is the greatest moment of my entire life. I never thought I had an opportunity to meet you. And she turned and screamed across the restaurant to her husband. She said, I was right, Joe. It is John Grisham. John's a good friend of mine. We've done a number of events together. He is a great guy. Love him to death. That moment in my life, not feeling the love for John at all. And my poor wife, I mean, to put it delicately, she like blew iced tea out of her nose. I don't know if you've ever blown iced tea out of your nose. It's not as easy as you might think it is. And I know that she did because most of it hit me in the chest. And she said very diplomatically to the woman, she goes, that's the right genre, but the wrong author. And the woman looked mortified, and she looked at me again, and she said, "Oh, my God, are you Baldacci?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." Obviously terribly chagrined that I was not Monsieur Grisham, she turned and yelled across the restaurant to her husband again and said, "You're all right, Joe, it is the Italian." So I don't know how I got my head out of the story, and I was like so big. Well, King and Maxwell. This is the 6th book in the King and Maxwell series. The last one was The Sixth Man. I first started writing about them because I was kind of into the Secret Service. I liked the idea of people who would be willing to give up their life for somebody they might not have even voted for, but are sworn to protect. And secondly, I'm always big into most of my books, a theme of sort of second chances and people who've fallen down and standing back up and making a new life out of the ashes of the old one. And that is really what those two guys are about. They both messed up at the Secret Service where the margin of error is like 0, and they lost those careers. But that common bond between them, they came back and came together and built a new career and a new life together out of those ashes. And through now 6 books, I've tried to develop that relationship, and it's a delicate balance. I mean, in this book, as in all the King and Maxwell books, you want to have a cool mystery plot that kind of, try to solve before the last page so you can write on Amazon, I figured it out. But also the evolution of the relationship between the two. You have to take it to another level. You have to expand it, evolve it, grow it somehow. And I try to do that in this book. And that's why I sort of keep coming back to all my series characters, I guess, whether it be the Camel Club or John Puller or King and Maxwell. My first 12, when I look back now, my first 12 or 13 books were all standalones. I never had recurring characters. I think King and Maxwell were really the first ones I ever brought back. And the reason I did that was when I finished the last page, I thought, these characters still have some juice to them. I'm going to see what I can do with them. Now, when I write books and research books, I don't just Wikipedia stuff. Anybody can Google whatever. I like to get out there and do what I can to get into the trenches and figure out what people do in my books, how they do it, why they do it. And when I started writing my military series, John Puller, I had a lot of friends in the military. Obviously, this area is full of people who work in the Department of Defense and military branches. And so a friend of mine who was a retired lieutenant colonel, he was a former Ranger, I guess always a Ranger. We jumped on a plane and flew down to Fort Benning, where the Rangers train. And I was down there for 3 days, training with the Rangers and trying to do some of the stuff that they did. I have no idea how I came back alive, but I did. When I first got down there, they took me to the parachute jumping grounds. And they have 2 towers at Fort Benning. One is a 212-foot tower where you actually jump off with a parachute. They wouldn't let me jump off of that one. Thank God, because I wouldn't have anyway. But the other tower was like a 4-foot-high tower. It's like a shack on top of a tower. They sort of simulate you're on an airplane fuselage and jumping out of that. And you're attached to a zip line. So, yeah, that's how I felt. Really, I felt like just totally weeping when this was about to happen to me. So I went there, and they put the helmet on, and they have all the cables, strap the cables on your shoulders, and they strap the cables around your legs. And all these paratroopers, you jump out of planes like it's nothing, and trying to explain to me, this is what you have to do, yada, yada, yada. And one of the guys said, look, one of the big things you have to remember is when you jump out of that tower, you're going to drop fast. And if the cables, particularly around your legs, are not cranked really tight, they're going to move. And they're going to hit a part of your anatomy you'll never forget. So my friend took a video of me going up the tower and jumping, and you can see me as I'm going up the tower. I'm like cranking these straps back around my legs. I had no blood flow in my lower extremities at all because I didn't want those cables to move. So I got up to the little box at the top, and there was a jump master up there, and the first thing he said was, "Are you afraid of heights?" And I have to tell you, when you're down on the ground looking 4 stories up, doesn't look like such a big deal. When you're on the top looking 4 stories down, it's like you're at the top of the Empire State Building. It just is. So I said, well, not until I got up here, I wasn't. He said, okay, let me tell you how it's going to go. The best thing to do is you stand back at the far wall and you get a running start and just jump out into the open air. And you can't see the zip line that's going to support you because it goes through a little hole in the wall. And all you have is a little cable attached to your shoulder. Jump out into the open air. He said, now the farther you jump out, the less you'll immediately drop. And the zip line will jerk you really hard to the right, and you're going to go down really fast at like a 45-degree angle. And he said the one thing you really have to remember is when you jump out, keep your chin tucked tightly to your chest. I said, okay, why is that? He said, well, otherwise the cable will come around and it'll take your ear off. And actually, I didn't really believe him until like a year later. I did a book signing, and the guy came up, and he looked like a military guy, and he said, hey, I heard you were at Fort Benning, did the jump? And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah. And he turned around, and he saw it, and his ear was like sliced almost in half. And he said, I didn't keep my chin down. I was like, holy shit, really? Yeah. So I kept my chin down, and he said, okay, and then you jump, and then there will be soldiers on the ground waiting to give you further instructions. And I said, while I'm in the air? He goes, yes, sir. I was like, okay. So I have to admit, it took me like 5 minutes to gather the courage to get back to the far wall, get a running start, and just jump into the open air. And apparently I was waiting for so long that down below, the paratroopers had a betting pool going. And it was like 99-1 that I was not jumping. And the only guy who would bet on me was the guy I'd flown down with, my friend. And I think he was hesitant, actually, to bet on me. And on the videotape that he took, you could hear one of the paratroopers, after I had not jumped for a while, he said you could hear him say, what the hell is he doing up there, writing a book? So I knew I had to jump. There was no way I was not going to jump. So I went back to the far wall. I got a running start. Chin was like glued to my chest, and I just jumped out as far as I could. And everything happened. You know, you drop, you get ripped to the right, you're flying down. You know, I open my eyes, and I see this huge dirt berm that I'm heading right for. I'm going to smash into it. And I thought, what idiot put this berm on the jumping ground? And then I realized I hear these people screaming at me, lift your feet, sir, lift your feet immediately. Those were the further instructions. So I lifted my feet well past my head somehow, and I cleared the dirt berm, and the guys grabbed the back of my straps before I, crashed into something, really hurt myself. And for that, the Army gave me a little piece of paper to say, congratulations, you jumped, which is nice. I've got that in my office, by the way. So then I went over to the sniper range and fired a bunch of weapons there at targets you couldn't even see without benefit of the scope. And at first I was missing by a wide margin, and the guys were helping with the scope. And then it was really weird because you'll fire the rifle, the sniper rifle. I fired both the manual and the auto, and the targets are so far away. You fire it, and then you have to wait. Count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and you bang, and you hear the bullet hit the metal target. It's kind of strange. And I did the rollover Humvee test, where they put you in a Humvee that's suspended on this roller, and they'll strap you in, and they roll you around to get you disoriented, and then they hang you upside down. So you're hanging upside down, and then you have to egress from the vehicle. They give you the order to egress. And because you're upside down, you have to sort of hold yourself up with one hand, because otherwise, when you take your straps off, you'll just smash into the ceiling of the vehicle, and then get out. And the first time I did it, I got out so fast, the guy who was there running it said, that's like a record. Nobody's ever gotten out of one of these as fast as you did. I said, that's right. And then I got on the other side, because you do both sides. I got on the other side, and he rolled me around, and he goes, egress, egress. So I was like, I couldn't get the cable off. I couldn't get it off. And you're supposed to simulate being like rolled over in water. There was no water, obviously, but you're supposed to get out before you drown. And I could not get the cable off. And finally, I was just like paralyzed. What do I do? And the guy on the PA said, is there a problem? I said, I can't get the cable off, the straps, the harness. He said, well, keep in mind you're in the other seat. I was like, oh. So for that one, I got a little sheet of paper from the Army that said, yes, you're stupid. But in addition to all that stuff, and doing the Army functional fitness training at 6 o'clock in the morning with two, master sergeants who built like brick walls for an hour nonstop. I thought I was definitely going to die with that one. And some other crazy stuff that I did. I sat down with a lot of soldiers, from everybody from privates to generals, and, just talked to them about stuff, why they were doing it. 18 years old, you can do a lot with your life. Because back then, when I wrote that book, the policy was at Fort Benning, because it was all infantry, that you get your basic training, then you get an extra month of it, specialized training if you want it, and then the next day, your butt's on a plane to Afghanistan. That's just the way it was. It wasn't like you were going to spend 4 years stateside doing stuff that you weren't on the line of fire. You were going into combat. So I learned a lot, and because of that, I think it made the book a lot better. And again, it's not things that you can Google or Wikipedia and write a compelling account about. You have to go out and do it. When I wrote about police officers in D.C., I did some walk-alongs and ride-alongs with police officers in various areas, and just learned a lot of stuff that you just can't, particularly the walk-alongs were pretty cool, because we got out of the patrol car, and he said, okay, let's go see if we can catch some bad guys. I was like, okay. It was just me and another officer, and he was smoking too, and I was like, please don't drop dead, because I'm like, I have no idea where I am, and this is kind of weird. So we were walking down an alley, and he said, the thing about an alley in this area is you better know where the alleys come in, because as they call them, the bandits do. I said, so every time we would start into an alley, I would go, wait, do you know where this alley comes out? Yes, I do. Let's proceed then. We went down one alley, and we were passing this wooden fence. And I was so impressed by what happened that I included part of it in the book. Something hit the fence so hard on the other side, it knocked one of the boards off and hit me in the head. And revealed behind it was this Hound of the Baskerville dog who was going like nuts. And he had one board loose, and he had his teeth around another board trying to torque it off so he could get through. So I looked at the cop, and I said, what do we do? And he was like, run! So we're like running. And I said, my God, whose dog is that? He said, it's Psycho's dog. I said, who's Psycho? He goes, Psycho is a double murderer. He sent away for life, and he left his damn dog. Dog's crazy. He said Psycho is Psycho. So in the book, True Blue, there's a Psycho in there, because it just left not only a bruise on my head, but just kind of bruised my ego too. But the craziest thing that happened during one of those walk-alongs, there was an arrest made, and so I'm sort of standing there. It was awkward, but I couldn't leave. I was there with a bunch of police officers, and I was just standing there, and they had the guy cuffed on the pavement, and then they lifted him up and turned him around, and so we sort of came eyeball to eyeball, and the guy kind of looked at me, and I kind of looked at him, and he was like, I love your books. What do you say? I mean, my thought was, I see a lot of reading time coming up for you. But, lots of different people read. So I like that. But the research is important. But the key to the research is leave most of it out. I'm not writing a textbook. So I may travel a bunch of places, read a bunch of stuff, do 10 interviews, and for a few paragraphs here and there, discreetly placed throughout a book. Because I don't want to write a flip book. A flip book is where a writer does a lot of research. They're very proud of it. They don't want to leave any of it out, but they don't want to take the time to integrate it. So they're like, and they just stick it in a spot. You've all read flip books. You're reading along, enjoying it, and all of a sudden you hit this research stuff, and you're like, flip, 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 flip. Oh, okay, there's the story again, and you keep going. So that's kind of my rule. I have a few things going on next year. I have a ebook only coming out. It's a short story or a long short story, short novella. Take your pick. It's called Bullseye. And it brings back the Camel Club, and I mix the Camel Club in with Will Roby, who's my government assassin. It's kind of like crossing television series streams, and put them into a little caper together. Then in March, I have a young adult fantasy that I've spent the last 5 years of my life writing called The Finisher. And I wrote it and sold it under a pseudonym because I wanted the publisher to buy it for the material, not for my name. And the name I used was Janus Pope. And Janus is the two-faced Roman god, one looking forward, one looking back. And the surname Pope, it's a Catholic thing, Sometimes it's as simple as that. And Scholastic, actually, when they bought the book, they thought I was a Brit. And so we'd love him to come over from England so we can meet with him and, get this book launched. And my agent said, well, he lives a lot closer. So when they found out it was me, they were quite stunned by that. So that'll be out March 4th, called The Finisher, and you'll be hard pressed to believe that it came from my pen. It's totally different from anything I've ever written before. But I haven't been this excited about a story in a long time. Just totally different. I could use my imagination unfettered. I didn't have to tie it to anything because I created a whole world out of nothing, which is kind of cool. So, and Sony Columbia bought the film rights to it a few months ago, and they, hope it could be like another Harry Potter or Hunger Games franchise. That would be great. But and the producer that they have on it is a guy who's done all the Amazing Spider-Man franchise for them. So they're treating it, like it's an important project for them. Then in April, I have a new thriller called The Target. It brings back Will Roby and Jessica Riegel from The Hit that was out last April. So that's the first part of next year for me. Now, for some of you know, we filmed Wish You Well, the movie, last year. And stars Ellen Burstyn and Josh Lucas and Mackenzie Ford from the last Twilight movie. And that will be out in the theaters on the latter part of next year. It's a beautiful film. It was an independent film project, and we went to the Heartland Film Festival and rocked there. We sold everything out, and by far the most watched show, and people just loved it. And we've been invited to another very prestigious film festival early next year, and if we get into that one, that would be kind of cool too. So that was one of the ones where I wrote the screenplay. I was one of the producers, and I was there for almost all the filming. And we filmed in Giles County, which is where they filmed Dirty Dancing. We stayed we had our crew. We had a 100-person crew when we were an independent film. We stayed at Mountain Lake Lodge, which is where that was Dirty Dancing, and I've never seen so many pictures and cutouts of Patrick Swayze in my whole life. I mean, he was everywhere. It was like I thought he was in my room too. You walk in, hey Pat, how you doing? Can you get out of the bed? But it was a great experience, probably the hardest I've ever worked in my life for the months that it took to do that project. It was about 2 months of pre-production, a month of filming, and then 6 months of post-production in New York on that film. So it takes a lot of work to make a bad film, much less a great one. So, but it was an eye-opener for me, and I learned a lot. And as a screenplay writer, you think when you've written the screenplay and you're ready to film, your job is done. No. You're rewriting the whole way through. And I was rewriting scenes for Ellen Burstyn, who's an Academy Award winner, writing scenes for her out in a farmyard with a rooster between my legs on my laptop, and she's inside in front of the cameras waiting for the page to be printed so they can film it. So a little bit of pressure there, but it was a great experience. Well, look, again, thank you all for coming tonight. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great holiday.